Hello, I am Leslie Sanchez. I am in Section 6, Group 6, and today I will be doing a presentation for my Animals and Society class 67. This is due December 1st, 2021, and this presentation will be against allowing GMOs in animal feed. People who contributed to part of this presentation slides yet were not present to do the presentation today are Desiree Reyes, Danny Ruiz, and Tatum Anaya. So a little history about GMOs. GMO stands for genetically modified organism. Something that says GMO on it typically has been produced from organisms that have had changes introduced to their DNAs. So organisms are like mice that have been tested on produce that we consume, or also vaccines, especially right now with COVID, that are being modified in order to benefit us. So the first time genetic modification was used was in 1974, and unfortunately after that they have just been overused significantly. This was done on a mouse by Rudolf Janisch, a professor of biology at MIT. And unfortunately, after 1974, especially since they used animals has been a big part of the use and experimenting in order to see how GMOs work. They are the ones who are unfortunately suffering from this. And it wasn't until the 1990s that there was a big wave of GMO, of produce becoming available to us. And this is seen a lot in the produce that is in the United States. We use a huge amount of GMO in our foods, in all our food consumption, and overall just in our daily life. So some sociological aspects of GMOs. So humans conduct a variety of research involving animal enhancements and even a color enhancement on apples. So as I mentioned before, unfortunately, animals are the main source of experiments when it comes to GMOs. They use things like mice. They can grow perhaps an ear on the back of a mice. They can use rabbits. They have used dogs, and when it comes to dogs, or any like bigger breed that can be aggressive, they try to get a breed that's docile. So for example, in dogs, they go for beagles because they're much more docile than other breeds, and they will let themselves be experimented, unfortunately. And when it comes to color enhancement on apples, you can see this not only in apples, but on a variety of fruits and vegetables, where these vegetables, fruits are not naturally grown in order to be sold. They have to insert GMOs in order for their shelf life to be extended, in order for them to appear appealing, in order they don't have their natural colors in them. This is a GMO implanted in them in order to be sold, in order to receive some type of profit from the consumer in this. So GMOs affect our quality of food and even maybe the life expectancy of a GMO animal. And also GMO research has stated that there can be about 20% increase in an animal's lifespan. So cultural and ecological impacts of GMOs. So unfortunately, we have seen an increase of the use of weed killing herbicides as weeds become more resistant. So farmers find themselves having to add new and harsher chemicals as weeds develop a resistance to glyphosate. And this overall harms our biodiversity and increases water and air pollution. So several of us perhaps try to avoid eating GMOs and think we're not being affected by GMOs at all, when because of GMOs are being used in produce that we are not consuming, it is still harming the biodiversity, it is still harming the water, and the air pollution is something that we're consuming and air that we're breathing. So it's still affecting us one way or another. It has also caused a disturbance in the traditional exchange of seeds among indigenous farmers. So indigenous farmers now have to go to bigger biotech companies in order to obtain this modified seed in order to sell it. So along with this, there's potential changes in identity and trust among involved farmers. I've seen it in California, where we like to support our local farmers, and we think that the profit is among the the community, the local farmers themselves, when unfortunately these farmers have to go to these bigger companies, put their money in their pockets in order to get these modified seeds. So more cultural and ecological impacts of GMOs. So some risk of these are new traits that could cause adverse health reactions. So for example, new proteins may cause allergic responses when without GMOs, um, the allergic response would be a lot less aggressive than it is with a GMO involved. Removal of traits could have unknown effects, and because the skyrocket of GMO use in produce was in the 90s, we don't have yet long-term effect of the risk of having the removal of traits using GMOs. And a lot of people think of it could cause cancer, because cancer is a DNA mutation, and pretty much this is what GMOs is. GMOs is a DNA mutation. We're removing traits in genes, or perhaps also inserting them. So crops may limit biodiversity of local environment. This increases competition with native species, and this can also go hand in hand with cross-pollination that could lead to superweeds. So for example, these superweeds, they're becoming more resistant to new and harsher chemicals, which can overtake these native species. In another point of view, in order to kill these superweeds, we're using new chemicals that will kill these superweeds. However, they will also kill these native species. So both points limit our biodiversity of the local environment. So patents restrict farmers from accessing GM seeds. So again, biotech companies hold monopolies over crop use. Fortunately, farmers are going to these bigger companies, putting their money in and getting what they can get from selling them themselves and growing it afterwards. Foods with GM components may not be labeled, and different governments may have conflicting regulatory standards concerning safe usage. So the United States having a high amount of GMO consumption in their produce and just in their overall health and environment, compared to other countries like Europe that avoids using GMOs. So in current events, again, Europe is against the use of GMOs. So people in the EU fear that the situation where a crop containing GMOs would be uncontrolled inside and outside farm fields. France even tested GMO corn in the early 200s, which then it later led to a ban that still continues now. They're not using GMOs. Mexico plans on phasing out genetically modified corn for human consumption by 2024, and no country buys U.S. corn exports than Mexico. So you can kind of relate this this issue with the farmers getting modified seeds from bigger biotech companies and putting their money in there. Same thing with Mexico. Mexico's putting their money in the U.S., buying U.S. corn exports and bring it back, when they're now trying to limit the human consumption by 2024, phasing it out, in which now Mexico will have the profit and will see the beneficiaries of it in its own country. So if you see the graph to your upper right, you can see that the US is one of the biggest GMO users compared to other countries, and it really makes you ask, why are we using so much? Is it really this necessary? If other countries can live without it, why can't we? Why? So another current event is an experimental study that was done last year in 2020, where they had livestock be fed on feeding that had GMOs in it, and they were able to observe a significant weight gain on the animals. They had changes in their pancreas and kidneys. They also had toxic effects to their immune system, and they had changes in blood biochemistry. So with this experiment, they were also concerned about the allergenic effects. So because there's a lack of long-term epidemiological studies that eventually would lead to safe conclusions about the allergenic effects of genetically modified plants, it really just limits what will happen in the future. So in the article, they mentioned this is because the introduction of a gene that expresses a non-allergenic protein does not mean that it will produce a product without allergenic action. Also, allergies from genetically modified products may be more intense and dangerous, as the allergenic potential of these foods is stronger than that of conventional plants. So, reasons to why be against GMO is pesticide resistance. And you can really think of this as a scenario of antibiotic resistance, where if you don't finish your antibiotic medicine, the bacteria will become resistant to that medicine and need something stronger, or perhaps it can become something more serious. And same thing happens with the pesticide resistance. However, even though they're still using stronger and more pesticides, it's more and more increasing the resistance. So it's now in crops that we are consuming. So crops on the market are sprayed with large amounts of herbicides, and this gene transfer is also happening in the wild. Even though they're not perhaps focusing on the wild, it's affecting the crops that they're trying to grow that we consume, and it's passing on to side wild, to the wild native growings around. So chemical companies are buying the world's seeds and genetically modifying them. Therefore, a lot of companies are controlling our seed and food supply. So farmers can no longer save and pass down those patent seeds because these chemical companies are pretty much in control and modifying these seeds because they have the ability to. Unfortunately, farmers do not have the ability to modify these seeds, therefore they have to go out and buy it themselves, and in order to sell it to us. And yet perhaps they might be thinking we're buying from a local organic farmer, yet they're using seeds that are being modified. So although there hasn't been a direct tie from GMOs to cancer, many believe that the added genes can affect our DNA in the long run. And as mentioned in the beginning, the skyrocket of GMO usage in our produce was in 1990. Therefore, it's about a 30-year 30-year gap that we have been using this GMO, so therefore we can't really see a long-term effect yet. A lot of people, again, are concerned of cancer appearing in people that have used lots of GMO just because of the DNA mutations, insertion and deletion of certain traits, and they just go hand in hand, and this is something that they truly worry about. And a lot of people also ask themselves, if it is safe, why not label them? Why not label the produce that have GMO? If GMO really benefits our health and is overall great for human consumption, why hide the fact that it is in a produce? If they should, on the other hand, they should be really enthusiastic and really showing off that they're using GMOs in certain foods if it's really that beneficiary to us. So based on the information we have provided, you guys, our informed opinion on this topic is that we have come to the conclusion that GMO feeds should not be used and or consumed. Everything we are consuming, especially in the United States, has one of the highest percentages of GMO in our resources, and we really don't see the reason behind it. Why are we using it? Yes, it creates more food for the Earth's capacity. However, it's still going to create some type of mutation in our health, in our overall health. There's really no other need to have so much GMO in our resources. And they are also fighting not to label what we are consuming when we have every right to know what we are consuming. And we are what we consume, and if we continue intaking GMOs, it will lead to something fatal. And here is the resources that we cited in our presentation. Hope you find it informative.